Just some quick comments from me before we get into our first two morning speakers. And the forum, we're entering into our 20th year, and our first one was held back in 2006 out at Butterfly Creek, and there was about 70 of us. And Inspire, Educate, Network was the theme right from day one. And I actually looked back. There's a really strong word that I want to just focus on this morning. And I looked back at my notes from 2006, and believe it or not, it was the same word that I had talked about at that. And it's this word, synergy. Synergy is the interaction or cooperation of two or more organisations to produce a combined effect greater than the sum of their separate effects. To me, it's a biblical implication, because with unity, it commands a blessing when we are united. And so synergy says that 1 + 1 is actually greater than 2. Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, said the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Synergy means that 1 + 1 may be much greater, and that it's a solution better than any originally proposed. The reason I make that point is that because around the back of the wall is a whole lot of organisations where we are all fighting for the same thing. And synergy means that we don't get all territorial and just say it's about our organisation and our funding source. It's where we say, actually, we want to encourage each other as organisations, because what we can do together will have far greater impact than if we sit in our own corner feeling sorry for ourselves because we think we're the only ones doing it. Because I think we have a common enemy, and the common enemy is what's happening to our culture. And I want to just take you on a quick journey on this. This data was released just yesterday, the general marriage rate. Just yesterday, Stats NZ put this out, and you can see that our marriage rate is in freefall. But not only that, New Zealanders are delaying when they're getting married. They're putting it off, and that has implications. But probably one of the saddest stats that I saw is that for the first time, this has just happened, kids are more likely to be born in a family where mum and dad are not married than if they are married. And yet, if you look back to the 60s, 95% of our kids were born where mum and dad were married. Now, unfortunately for Māori, it's even worse. The blue represents unmarried. The orange represents married. And yet, back in 1968, almost 3/4 of Māori kids were born to mum and dad who were married. Now, it's 1 in 5. And our fertility rate is going through the floor. We need 2.2 on average to replace our population. The latest stats, it's in red so it's hard to see, 1.57. So we have a declining population. And as someone who's getting close to retirement, back in 1970, there were 7 people under retirement age for every retired person. It's now 4 people for every one, and in 50 years, it's going to be just 2 workers for every retired people. You oldies, are you worried? You should be. And we're not having kids. You can see there that the light blue line is the latest data, and the latest data shows that it's people having no children or just 1 children that's growing. In fact, Radio New Zealand got very excited last week and talked about the fact that our fertility rates are at a record low. They didn't talk about the impact, but they managed to find 3 women who didn't want to have kids. How exciting. This data is going in the wrong direction as well. Do you remember that act of kindness that Jacinda did when we were going into lockdown, when she made it easier for us to kill the child in the womb? And there has been an increase. And what's interesting to note is that unfortunately our abortion rate is more disproportionately affecting Māori and Asian. And the other thing to note is that the poorer a family is, the more likely they are to have an abortion. High deprivation, higher abortion rate. Team, we need to come up with solutions to say that killing your child in the womb is not a solution because you think you can't afford to have children. As we heard last night, our euthanasia is going in the wrong direction as well. And there's been a big increase, but apparently, according to the ACT Party, we still aren't killing enough people, elderly people, so we need to kill more, and so they want to make the rules easier. And yet what's interesting to note is that when you look at the data, New Zealand, European, 80% of euthanasia. Look how disproportionately low the Māori, Pacific, and even Asian are. They understand the sanctity of life far better. And we've done a number of reports of what happens when we delay having children and the biological clock ticking, when we have low marriage rates, when we don't have that commitment, when we don't have that solid formation of families. And we found that, unfortunately, families that struggle, and I take my hat off to single parents because I think they're doing a double shift. It's hard enough with two of us doing it. But solo parents are doing double the workload. And yet they struggle the most financially and are more likely to be in child poverty. Child abuse has grown as our marriage rates have declined. Do you know the safest place for a child to be is with its biological dad? And the greatest likelihood that dad will stay around is if he's married to the mother of that child. But we're not allowed to talk about that, are we? The only time we talk about marriage and family structure is when we celebrate how many same-sex marriages there were. Unfortunately, this morning when I got up, unfortunately, as part of my research, went to Radio New Zealand's website, and they were crowing about the fact that our marriage rate is going through the floor. But they were very excited because there were 29 extra same-sex marriages this year. That was their headline. And imprisonment as well shows that family breakdown, you're far more likely to end up in prison. UNICEF put out a report in May, and they found that our 15 to 19-year-olds have the highest suicide rate in the OECD. We also have the second highest bullying rate. And that's why on the league table, well, if this was a Premier League football table, we're in relegation zone. And we can't even get kids to school. The red line is the total, and you can see there, sure, there was a dip during COVID, but it's still hovering around the 60% mark of kids who are turning up to school 90% of the time. Salvation Army report put out in beginning of this year identified that our kids are still at threat. Serious assaults and serious assaults with injuries have risen by 73% and 30% respectively. And our kids are not doing well mentally. This was from the Salvation Army report. High psychological distress. And you can see there, it goes back to 2014, and it continues to increase. But we've actually researched further back than 2014. I want to show you a couple of graphs. This is hospitalisation for mental disorders 0 to 19. Big increase. Anxiety disorder. Percentage of children diagnosed with emotional or behavioural problems, 2 years old to 14. Mental health and addiction services. Hospitalisation for mental and behavioural disorders, anxiety disorder, mood disorder. Now, you'll notice that they all start around the red block. And you're probably saying, Bob, what's the red block? It was 2007. What happened in 2007? We passed an anti-smacking law. And the problem with the anti-smacking law was simply that it said to parents, the state knows better how to raise your kids than you do as parents. It also said to kids, we're not concerned about discipline, guidelines for you. Your rights matter more than anything. You can identify however you'd like to. And we'll come back to that other topic this afternoon on Straight Talk. It's one of our topics this afternoon, is child abuse. How do we really solve the issue? Stats NZ are very excited about the LGBT population. You can probably see that in their logo, can't you? But you'll see that it is a trend of our younger generations who are confused about their gender and sexuality. In fact, when you look at people who couldn't figure out if they were male or female, it was highest amongst our youngest kids. Now, it's only 1%, you'll note. It's 1%. But you can see that it's starting early. Gee, it just might be starting in primary schools with Inside Out and other groups confusing our kids. We don't have the trend in New Zealand, but in the US you can see mass explosion in the younger generation wanting to identify like this. And here's another graph going in the wrong direction. And we'll hear about a bit more about this afternoon with two very brave testimonies. Here's the other issue that I think we need to stand together and lock arms on, and that is the destruction of the values which have underpinned New Zealand, our spiritual DNA. In the last census, for the first time, a majority said that they had no religious affiliation. It's the first time we've crossed that line. And there's a handful of countries in the world that have that depressing stat. The pink represents the Christian proportion of the blue total population. You can see back in the 1960s it was a very high percentage of Christian adherents, now very, very low. And when you look at the age distribution of people who don't affiliate with any religion, you can see that it's very high in the younger generation, although I think there's starting to be a turnaround. And it's why we've got people here from Manukau Christian School, because they're actually seeing the effect of this experiment of left-wing ideology and Marxism. And then, of course, you've got the left wing and the right wing. The left wing is the blue and the right wing is the red. And the left has just got so radical that they've gone to the very, very far left. And so we're finding that people who originally thought they were centre left actually realise that the right were right, because we are right. That's why they call us right. But the other trend that we have, and this is one of our topics also for a Straight Talk episode that we're recording this afternoon, is trust in the media. And the AUT report said that the trust in New Zealand media has gone through the floor. But a lot of people say it's a worldwide trend. The interesting thing is that according to Reuters' survey, we have one of the lowest in the major countries. We're competing with the US for fake news. It reminds me of the scripture in 2 Timothy that says, "The time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but according to their own desires, because they have itching ears, they will heap up for themselves teachers, and they will turn their ears away from the truth and be turned aside to fables." And we're seeing that in New Zealand as we reject the Judeo-Christian values and we see the social consequences. There is a new cultural religion in town, which I talked about a couple of forums ago. And we understand DEI, deity, Agnus Dei, Lamb of God. There is a new deity in town. It's called diversity, equity and inclusion, which is diversity is around identity politics, inclusion is language, but it's being defined. We can't even define violence, let alone what a woman is, as we heard from Kirili last night, and equity is Marxism. But what DEI really is deception, inequality and exclusion. It's gender and sexual confusion, it's special rights for special groups, and it's cancel culture. And that's why there's a call for hate speech, because hate speech laws are really punishment for the blasphemy of not believing in DEI. And so words that we valued like truth, humility, love and discernment have all changed. Truth is now, no, it's self-identity. Humility is now pride. Love is, well, no, we tolerate everything and we love everybody with that tolerance. And discernment is based on rights. It has got so wacky that even our academia don't know their Arthur from Martha. Here's a definition from Johns Hopkins University on a lesbian, and they defined it as a non-man attracted to non-men. So what effect has it had on you and me? Well, the problem is that you and me are going to be impacted by this. And we've already seen it. We've seen Kath, the baker up in Warkworth, who simply said she didn't want to bake a cake for a same-sex wedding and got pilloried in the media. We saw a woman turn up to Dunedin City Council saying that she didn't want dudes in the women's changing room and her views were labelled as repugnant. We saw Margaret Court in Australia, who's an AOG pastor now, and big protest because, believe it or not, she actually preaches from the Bible. And so they wanted to rename her court. We saw the Manly Seven who didn't want to wear the pride shirt and got pilloried and received the death threats. Here in New Zealand, we saw the teacher who didn't want to tell a biological lie and so lost his teaching licence. And more recently, we saw the IRD employee, a former IRD employee, who said, "Why are we putting menstruation products in the men's toilets?" And got a bit of a serve because of that. Helen Houghton, who was supposed to be here today but is sick and puts in her apologies, she did a petition saying that we don't want gender ideology and indoctrination in schools, 40,000 signatures on the government website, and she was written to by a group of teachers saying, pull your petition down or we're going to get you deregistered as a teacher. We pushed back on them and they backed off. And you might be monitoring this one that the Free Speech Union is currently campaigning on, where a counsellor has had complaints, not from clients or from families, but from other counsellors who don't like the fact that this counsellor thinks that the CAS report has got it correct and that castrating and chemicalising confused kids is not the solution. When the conversion therapy ban was passed, they said it wasn't really about that law. Please understand that. It was about shutting down churches. It was about shutting down messages, biblical messages that they don't like. And so when Posey Parker comes over, apparently these signs aren't the offensive ones. No, according to the media, actually it's the Catholic groups that are actually the problem, far-right Catholic groups. I never knew that. Quite interesting, eh? And when my good friend Simon O'Connor, I just want to say one of the best things I did last year was employ Simon O'Connor. I just want to put that out there, eh? But when Simon O'Connor put out a post saying that the rights of the unborn child mattered, Chanel Lull and David Farrier put this post up saying that this Pākehā man is an F&C. You probably didn't hear about that in the media because they can get away with that type of language. But they'd rather go after Bethlehem College. Actually, there's also some students here from Bethlehem College that I'm aware of as well, because they believe in marriage as one man, one woman. But the media go after the school counsellor who may believe that you're born male or female. And they go after Christian schools up north as well. Interestingly, they don't go after I'll call it a church school, because that's the best I can come up with, St Hilda's Collegiate School, who put out this post where they were celebrating Trinity Week with Pride Week. And in their publication, they said that Western society has been dominated by nasty binaries, pairs of opposites, where there's often a hierarchy, such as men and women, heaven and earth, right and wrong, black and white, adult or child. Two-ness has been ambushed by threeness. Life is much more about diversity. It is not black and white, but it's a rainbow. You probably didn't hear about that one in the media. So my message this morning is it's time for us to take the tape off. We need to speak up. And I want you to look at this photo. I don't know if you've seen this before. It's a whole group of men, and it's believed to have been captured at the ceremonial unveiling of a boat in Germany on June 13th, 1936. And both the Führer and the Deputy Führer were present at the ceremony. And following the christening of the ship, everybody gave the mandatory salute to Germany and the country's leader. If you look closely in the photo, there's one who's not. He's got his arms folded. 26-year-old August Landmesser was the one who refused to raise his arm in the Führer's presence. Landmesser had fallen in love with a Jewish woman, Irma Eckler, and started a family welcoming their daughter in October 1935. Their marriage application was denied under the newly enacted Nuremberg laws. They tried to flee to Denmark but were arrested. He was again arrested and put in a concentration camp. This was the last time he ever saw his wife and child in 1938. It's believed he was killed during the war. Irma, the wife, passed between concentration camps and was transferred to the Bernburg Euthanasia Centre. There she was one of 14,000 people killed in the gas chamber, and their 2 children were adopted out. August Landmesser likely found himself incapable of saluting the very man who dehumanised his wife and daughter. Landmesser might have been casually aware that there were propaganda photographers around, that he would be caught out, but he had a backbone. He thought only of his family and what was best, and he wanted to speak up against evil. They were officially declared dead in 1949, August and Irma, and you'll see there in 1951, the Senate of Hamburg recognised the marriage of August Landmesser and Irma Eckler. The reason I tell you that story is that, like August, we each need to make a stand against the culture, no matter the cost. No matter the cost. If you leave your children a world where you never stood up, they'll inherit a world where they can't. My favourite quote is Reverend Billy Graham, "Courage is contagious. When a brave man takes a stand, when you take a stand, it stiffens the spines of others." Some people are just wanting to know that there's someone else standing with them. And that's why we don't do this conference online, because we want you to feel the electricity of knowing that there is a mass movement wanting to turn this country around for good. And there's a whole lot of organisations that we want to stand with, that we want to promote, that we want to like their posts, that we want to share, that we want to cross-promote, that we want to speak well of. Because what unites us is far greater than the little minute things that we might disagree on. James Dobson, founder of Focus on the Family, and you're going to get to meet one of his staff in just a minute. I love this quote from him. He said, "Isn't it good to be on the side of truth? If we stay the course, our positions will never contradict themselves. We may not win every battle, but will ultimately win every war." I've probably varied that slightly, and I usually say we may not win every battle, but we'll lose every battle that we don't even show up to. But if you want, I love that statement that he makes, our positions will never contradict themselves. If you want to understand the contradiction of the left, just go and watch that clip of Chris Hipkins trying to explain what a woman is. It just shows the contradiction and the muddling of the mind. So that's why you're here. We want to inspire you, want to educate you, but we want to network, because Synergy says that what we can do together is going to be far greater than if we just operate in our little corners of the world. Amen?